Welcome back, party people. I think I'm just going to start saying that from now on.
Feeling good today, girl?
Party people. We're going to talk about elections instead. Oh, sweet.
It has been a long day, so if you are going to reprimand me for acting recklessly, do it quickly.
On the contrary, I've come here to...
Yeah, I was going to talk about Henry Clay. I was going to talk about a bunch of different other political figures, but
And you,
not right now. I want to talk about elections and how things go and how
no matter what happens, you should feel
they usually go.
for what you did today. You put my sister in her place and saved an Avenger while you were at it. You deserve all the kudos you can get.
I am just relieved that we were able to uncorrupt Banner and bring him back safely to the Abbey.
It's a wonder he's even alive after an ordeal like that. It must have been quite an encounter you had with Lilith. I can see it in your collar. It seems to be on its last legs.
I do not want you to worry about me.
Well, that's not happening.
Have faith it will hold.
And, sorry, losing my train of thought. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lordy.
Is irreplaceable. This is it. No replacements. It took all my ancestral powers to create it for you. Every last drop. There is nothing left. So in case you were ever wondering why I'm not Super Sarah, now you know.
Sarah. Okay. But anyways,
All my power.
we're going to just talk about elections. We'll start with the election of 1800. I don't count the elections of Washington because it was basically just, can we just get him to run twice? Basically was the whole ticket. He was the guy, the alpha, the dog. He had the dog in him. And, you know, he becomes president twice. The first real election happens in 1800 between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Sorry. Let me take that back. 1796. I'm a very silly person. That's the election that I want to talk about. That's the first election that really decides things. This is the first election held between two people that weren't George Washington. The first quote-unquote contested election in the history of this country was primarily between the two main candidates, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson.
Hey, Hunter, come on, let's toast.
Didn't you just have one?
Yeah, but not with you.
John Adams, an avowed Federalist, and Jefferson, the Anti-Federalist, or Democratic Republicans, or Jeffersonian, whatever you want to call it. Understand a couple things too. Elections are very different back then. It was really decided by the states, whoever they elected to be the individual who was going to be a member of the Electoral College. Both of them basically, it was usually two people. It was 2 votes per individual of the Electoral College, depending on the population of your state, which can make things a little bit testy because, you know, there are some even-numbered individuals there, which is why when you look at the electoral map, it's a little bit funky. You know, 1 electoral vote in the state of Virginia for John Adams, even though it went to Thomas Jefferson. You know how, just very weird electioneering. Not to mention, too, before the ratification of the 12th Amendment, whoever lost the presidency was going to be the vice president of the winner, which I think it was basically, you know, the loser is the second qualified person, and then they should be the person next in line to be the individual who's gonna take over effectively.
Then they would be in for a major disappointment.
and the individual with the majority of the electoral votes, the majority,
You seem in good spirits.
would be the winner.
I am.
And if there was a tie, or there was
I am far,
or someone who didn't have a majority, then the House of Representatives of each state would basically elect the president, which happens in 1824, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that election.
Some sort of medieval
And if there was a tie for second place at the time, then basically who was going to be the vice president, like say there was like 5 candidates and there was a tie for second place, then the Senate actually would hold an election themselves and vote for who they believe would be the vice president.
I feel like I've been cast as too many different characters in my life, and don't really know who I am
Now, 2 things to note.
or who I'm supposed to
First, this was a very
be. Am I?
frustrating campaign for both sides, for Adams and for Jefferson. Both had pretty much, their friendship had just gone down the drain. They're fighting, and then this really just did not help in any way, shape, and form. This is the beginning of the problems domestically and overseas. The French Revolution's happening. People are taking sides in this country because a lot of them see it as like a second American Revolution, but in France, although it really was not so, and people misinterpreted what the French Revolution ultimately was. And a lot of people who were a part of the Jeffersonian bloc, or the Thomas Jefferson side, were antagonistic towards the John Adams, quote-unquote, Alexander Hamilton side. The Federalist policies that they had implemented during the Washington administration. A lot of it had to do with favoritism between different countries, because Thomas Jefferson, seeing France, was like, we gotta side with France, and then Adams and Hamilton rightly were like, look man, we are from Great Britain, our lineage is from Great Britain, despite us getting away from them, we still have English common law, yada yada. We need to have and maintain a relationship with Great Britain, so we're gonna do that. And basically Great Britain versus France kind of thing in America, you know how it goes. And
She was too emo and gothy, so I traded her in.
largely it was just a battle between 2 fundamental ideas and what what they wanted to go in terms of the general direction of the country. For John Adams, he was the guy. He was already the vice president. He was already like the number 2, despite having a contentious relationship with Washington as the vice president. Other individuals were thought. A lot of people thought Patrick Henry was going to. I thought Patrick Henry's. My dogs. Thought Patrick. Oh lordy. Thought Patrick Henry was going to be a part of it. He has Thomas Pinckney as another Federalist candidate. There's a bunch of candidates too. It's not just one individual. John Jay is another individual who's attempting to run, but ultimately ends up choosing Pinckney as his vice president once he wins their quote-unquote primary. Alexander Hamilton does a whole bunch of different things behind the scenes to get Adams the nomination, mainly because he just wants to win. He just wants to win. That's just basically what Hamilton wants to do. And largely speaking, there's a bunch of people. Samuel Adams, George Clinton, Aaron Burr, all these different individuals who are prominent in their time. But everyone largely united behind Thomas Jefferson as the foundational presence of the foundational presence of what is their ideas, which is why they end up calling themselves Jeffersonians in a lot of ways. So now we get the Hulk.
I've been making excuses to people for years, trying to reconcile the great things I've done with the terrible things the other guys did. But this time I have no excuses. I was the worst monster. Not him.
Well, who's poking around Santa's workshop? Don't mind us. Just wanted to make sure.
Now there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes in terms of certain political machinations, because this was going to be a very close and contested election. and Hamilton is accused of swaying just a couple of votes in the South that would help actually basically sway the election, mind you. Whether it's political, I got some dirt on you, you got some dirt on me. I opened this bank up, I can give you a loan or two. Little things like that that he's pushing forward.
All I have are ideas right now. Lots of ideas.
And then, in a lot of ways, it was campaigning because Adams and Jefferson were doing the whole front porch campaigning. They wouldn't campaign for themselves. And Hamilton was campaigning for him diligently. Now, it's funny to think of swing states nowadays, but back then there were swing states. The South was pretty solidified in their antagonism towards the federal government. Pretty much from Virginia down in the South were just not, no bueno. No bueno. Okay.
It just now struck me how relieved I am that Bruce is back here with us. Guess I didn't realize how soon.
But certain states in the North, Pennsylvania in particular, was a big swing state. And remember, too, there wasn't 500 electoral votes to go out there. It was closer to about 140 or 139, I think, specifically. Pennsylvania was one that was going to be a very, very tricky one for them to get. Mainly because they were completely antagonistic to the federal government, yada yada. A lot of them, I think James Carville has a famous line where he says, in Pennsylvania, it's, you have Pittsburgh, you got Philadelphia, and then in between you got Alabama. Just to give you an idea of the sensibilities in Pennsylvania, why it's always a very interesting state to poll and do all that stuff for. But pretty much most of the Northeast, like Massachusetts, Delaware, Maryland, New York, all those states were largely going to be. Who do you talk to? Where's the caretaker? Oh.
I take it you've talked to Banner.
Were largely going to be for
How do you think he's
Adams.
readjusting?
I did not know Bruce that well before he fell, but he seems to be reacting.
Hmm.
In his
And people didn't really care about the popular vote. It is what it is. Back then, not a lot of people could vote because most people in the states could only vote if you were like a landowner. Which the idea was, I think, which is fair, especially today. These people have specifically skin in the game that a lot of people didn't back then. Obviously back then it's a little more complicated because now you're clearly creating an oligarch kind of state where it's just, only the rich and the most powerful can actually make a significant change, and it's hard to get out of debt and create your own life and your own strength, basically. Today it's a little different because now you have people who can vote willy-nilly who have zero skin in the game, and we get things like this nowadays. Say what you will about it, but yeah. And I'm sorry, it's not 130, it's 270 is the total electoral vote count. At least I believe so. But I think it's also based off of party too, I'm not quite sure. But largely, Thomas Jefferson and Adams were the top two vote getters in terms of the Electoral College.
Yeah, I don't think we should be breathing this air.
It's gamma radiation. It's fine to breathe. Yes, but it gives the skull a beautiful tinge of color, doesn't it?
Like the sky before a storm.
Anyone want to tell me what
and you just needed the votes really for that state in order to actually get it and win it.
His way into our dimension.
Not if I have anything to do with it.
Let's go inside. We have work to do.
Hunter, we should, I should speak with you about what you did to me.
Is that an accusation?
Of course not.
You accusing me, bro?
I am grateful, of course. It's been so long since I've thought.
I'm gonna level with you. I think this part's just gonna be a little bit shorter. I do have a lot of things going on that I need to get done, so we might actually cut this part before we even fight, unless we can find a quick match to do real quick. And I think a lot of people in Europe were kind of curious about what was going to happen in terms of who was going to win and who wasn't going to win. Specifically, I think England was very curious because, for the most part, you know, either way you're probably not going to win, but they're probably preferring John Adams over anything else. They'd rather have a hot-headed individual who doesn't like Britain versus someone who, in Thomas Jefferson, was running away and being chased by British troops, you know, putting his family's life at risk, and clearly siding with the crazy French people, you know, over that, basically. And then, you know, France is like, we got the American support if we can get, you know, Thomas Jefferson and yada, 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 you know.
Not all of it, but enough. At this moment, your excitement grows as the prophecy gets
And I understand, too, that it was enshrined in the Constitution.
The Abbey is open to it.
Article 2, Section 1, or Section 2, basically saying that the state legislators would decide who the electors would be, and every single state did things very differently. Like, most of the northeastern states tended to just appoint each director directly by the state legislature, so they would just choose. More of the, like Virginia and all of them decided they were going to split their electors up by districts effectively, which is why I think Virginia has one electoral vote for John Adams. Georgia and Pennsylvania are a little bit different because they were basically like, we're going to choose things based off of popular vote statewide for the most part. Massachusetts is a little different because it's basically like, we're going to appoint two of you guys to be or two electors based off of from the state legislature. They would choose two people, and then everyone else would basically just be chosen by the respective congressional candidates' top two vote getters. Also, too, Tennessee is, I think it was ratified as a state at this particular point, so they have like 3 electoral votes. And they specifically just divided it into 3 solid districts, which each one can vote for specifically, all who went to Jefferson. But largely speaking, John Adams wins. It's a very hotly contested election from the get-go. People are fighting. People, not physically fighting, but they're arguing left and right. How dare you? A lot of campaign smears, which are only going to get it worse than the next election, the election of 1800. And this makes things even more complicated and difficult because the main issues are an American identity, how we're going to be a sovereign nation overseas with foreign powers, and can I just leave? Okay, cool. And you know, the growing difficulties with the economy, the debt that's slowly but surely rising, and the problems that are happening around this particular point in time. Not to mention land, not to mention expansion all across the rest of the United States is there, which doesn't really happen until Thomas Jefferson's presidency. But people are moving out west, occupying territories that will become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, all those different places. There's a lot of things to be worried about, you know. Not to mention like the ideas of your constitutional rights being sufficiently ingrained in you, and you're the first generation to receive these constitutional rights, and you know you have to hold them up because the federal government at a moment's notice could just snap, you know, take it away. So you have to stay pretty strong and determined in that fundamental belief. So this election, in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, was a very determining one in terms of what a lot of people thought was going to be the future of this country post George Washington, because you didn't know. No one knew. We know now. We know how it turned out, but no one knew back then. I mean, imagine if you're in 1796 and it's like George Washington's out, he doesn't want to be king, and he's doing what you don't want to do, which is retire and let, you know, people figure it out for themselves and just give hope that we can survive as a nation and that the beliefs are strong enough in your liberty, you know. And you know, I think a lot of people were afraid by that. A lot of people were stern in these fundamental beliefs, and there's a real rift. And this is my problem with people who say, you know, there shouldn't be any political parties, because the truth is there's always going to be political parties. It's just always going to happen. No one wants it to happen, and I don't think anyone likes the party politics, but as long as two people just disagree with one another, like, it's always going to occur. Why does he look like that? Oh, sorry. He just looks funny. Oh, lordy. Oh, hell yeah. Level 16 Spidey. But it is a hotly contested election. Adams ultimately does win it. How does he win it, though? Certain states tended to they voted along, I guess you could say, party lines, but really it was Hamilton's machinations that really did push things over the border. He steals basically a couple electoral votes from Pennsylvania, Virginia, which had not separated from West Virginia, mind you, yet, and North Carolina. It's only a 3 electoral vote difference between the two, really. But Adams ends up winning it. 71 electoral votes to 68 electoral votes, you know? And honestly, if you had to have a poll back then, there was a lot of people that were sternly in the fundamental belief in the Jeffersonian ideals, but there's also a lot of people, especially in the Northeast, who have a lot of power, control, trade especially, that are going to have, you know, a bigger say in how things go. It's literally between farmers and industrialists, you could argue. And the industrialists just won out. They had more influence, especially considering that initially at the time, Congress and the White House and all that, or the presidential mansion, you know, they were in the Northeast area before they got moved down to what is now known as the District of Columbia in D.C. The heck is a god killer? That's interesting. Okay. Do. Need more of those. Let's do that. Okay, with that. Damn, I need to do more of these Gamma Coil things. Ooh, that's actually a pretty good one. Sure. What level do I need to be at the God Killer? Level 10? Cool. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Alright, I'm going to talk to just a couple other people, and then I'll probably end the part right here.
Shield saying the green skies are just a normal atmospheric event. This is not an Avengers level threat. I don't remember being consulted on that decision. Did you, Steve?
I think this election is consequential, because this election showed that I love the Founding Fathers and the people who founded this country in a lot of ways, and not just the congressmen, but the actual people who fought and died in the war. Those are like the Founding Fathers to me. And, you know, they didn't have all the ideas. They made a lot of mistakes, you know. It's not perfect. This election is quite literally the biggest example of that. And I don't think our electoral process is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a foundational reason why it exists and why it is foundationally important and needs to be understood. And there's a reason why we don't vote with a popular vote, because we're not a direct democracy, and we've never been in, or not supposed to be, a direct democracy. But nothing's perfect. And I think this election shows that this election was far from perfect.
Save the damage control spin for after we banish Chthon. If we banish Chthon.
Okay. Stop talking. Okay.
So, the midnight sun has arrived. Despite our best efforts,
Cool.
threatening to end the lives of millions.
Cool.
Yes, I know. But as Wanda so compassionately, it's my strong opinion we should save as
Let's save all the people we can.
I thought you.
Hydra's everywhere.
That's up to you. But I do want you to bring Banner.
Ever since I learned of the Hulk's existence,
I can't wait. The next time we'll be playing this, we'll be playing with the Hulk. Happy hunting. Bada bing, bada bing, bada boom. Alright, guys. We're gonna end this part right here. God bless. Like and subscribe. Again, any comments you want me to do to improve the content, just let me know. Y'all rock. Later.